Board of Directors study session to order. Please stand and join
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you all for joining us tonight. We'll move on to approval of agenda. Are there any changes to the agenda? Is there a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved by David and seconded by Marcia to approve the agenda. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The agenda has been approved. We will move right into Dr. Jarvis's superintendent's report. He will present and introduce some new administrators to our district.
It is truly my pleasure to catch up on a couple of introductions. During the busy late summer and getting ready for opening, we did not make a couple of the introductions as people came on board, and they were busy, and they worked with us to say, could you do it on the 12th and not the last meeting? So I said, sure. So it is my pleasure to introduce a couple people that most of you have met and have already begun their duties, and they're already becoming well known in the community. But to begin with, I'd like to introduce our new assistant principal at Harbor Heights Elementary School. And obviously, as we promoted David to the principal, that left his position open. So is Kelsey here this evening? Kelsey, I couldn't see over there. This is Kelsey Carr. And I would just proudly say to you, if you haven't had a chance to visit Harbor Heights, David is the new principal and joined by Kelsey as the new assistant and new to the Peninsula School District. It is truly my pleasure to reintroduce to the district Ms. Kelsey Carr. And Kelsey, would you like to say anything as you
Happy to be here, isn't it?
Thank you and welcome
Yeah.
Kelsey. Also new to the Peninsula School District and joining us at Peninsula High School is Dr. Joe Potts. And I know Joe has been very visible already at football games and a variety of things, to say nothing of his duties. He's been on staff now for already 2 months. So we welcome Dr. Joe Potts as the new principal of Peninsula High School, and he's already established himself broadly throughout the system, so I suspect all of you have had one or more conversations. Dr. Potts, welcome to the Peninsula School District. Thanks for being here tonight. Would you like to say anything to the group?
Keep it short. I just feel blessed and honored to be part of the school district. And I was saying to somebody today, I look forward to getting up and coming to school every day, which is really a statement. So thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Potts. We, short version, are now in week 3. So our 3, 4, 5 pattern, we had our 3-day week and 3-day weekend. And there were a lot of people, staff members in particular, that were loving that 3-day weekend on the heels of the first 3 days. But it was a very successful opening, followed by our 4-day week. That was the week in which our kindergartners arrived. I happened to visit 4 of the kindergarten classrooms on that Friday. I guess it was about midday, and those teachers were exhausted. You forget, I guess, what it's like in those, particularly those kindergarten classrooms, when the children walk through the door knowing nothing of any routine, nothing of anything that they're supposed to do, and pretty amazed by the order that kindergarten teachers are already brought to that by that Friday afternoon and their 4th day. But the real bottom line to that is 700 new kindergartners, 90 more than we had a year ago. I would just offer many, many thanks and blessings to the staff and the principals for making it work beautifully. I would also include in that the fact that the purchase of the Boys and Girls Club and creating the annex for this year, which freed up some classrooms. I can't imagine where we would be this fall without those classrooms having been available to us to house. And so for David and Stephanie and Delana, all making it work with moving our 4 fifth grades out of Discovery and how that has worked beautifully, and moving the preschool, the 4 preschools into that building and making that work. It's just been absolutely marvelous. A testament to staff on all fronts, starting with our facilities crew and Patrick and all of his staff, and what was done over the summer to get that ready and open. Every person throughout. I watched the people trying to figure out the traffic pattern at Discovery and the shuttle buses, et cetera. And day one was somewhat confusing. I think there was one very good piece of news. Day one was just enough to convince some of the parents that the yellow buses were really a good idea. Put the children on the buses and let the buses navigate. So anyway, by day 2, I watched a remarkable difference in terms of the traffic and the loading and the unloading and how to solve some of the problems. So to really our entire transportation crew, today as I was coming up the hill about, I don't know what time it was, maybe about 1:30, 20 minutes later I got here. The buses were stacked up, both coming up the hill and down the hill, and the construction. But even there, the construction company has worked with us from the very first discussion and made sure that they could open it up, get the buses through and get the parents through and get any of us in and out. So I just wax enthusiastic for some marvelous teamwork of putting it all together and having it work. So now we're in week 3. And we are off and running, and I haven't counted today to figure out exactly how many more days are left this year, but we are truly well into the 1920 school year. The last item I would mention is that you're going to hear a capital projects report this evening, and as part of that, and these, you're going to see some unveiling of the design work that's been underway. I think there's just a tremendous amount of excitement in the community and certainly in the district. So I'm also beginning a round of taking the renderings and being able to talk about where we are after this design phase. I think I already have 8 to 10 appointments out there. We had one last night with the Lions Club to share where we were in the facility development. So I offer that also to groups. Brooke, on my behalf, has sent word out to, I think, about 20 different groups that are trying to work out a calendar for me. But if you've got somewhere that we need to go, whether there's a few people or a bunch of people, we're really happy to share and roll out at this stage. Say thank you to people for approving 7 months ago a bond issue that allowed us to develop the schemes and the concept for 4 schools and work on the pace that we are working on. So what you see tonight, we'd like to take to the road, and some of you may have suggestions. I have an appointment already with the Key Peninsula Community Services and Senior Center, the Key Peninsula Fire Board, the PSEF Foundation Board, the Gig Harbor City Council, the Key Peninsula Business Associates, the Key Peninsula Alliance. So Key Peninsula responded very quickly, and we're getting out there even first. They get to chuckle and say we were first. But wherever that can occur, I'm more than willing to try to spend. And if I can't make it, we have a number of other people that can fill in very ably and share where we are as a district. But it's I think a terrific way to say back to the community both a thank you for what you approved, be able to show them where we are and what's been developed, and then to know that within a relatively short time, and you're going to hear the timeline, we'll be at that stage of bidding the projects, letting the bids, beginning construction, and it's a pretty amazing year. So on that note, I'm just going to end my superintendent's report and say it's been wonderful. It's a great opening and just great progress. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Jarvis. Excellent. Look forward to that report soon. We'll move on to Audit and Finance Advisory Committee. I'm going to ask the committee chair, Ms. Elena Brown, to present the report from the last meetings. Come on up and have a mic and speak into it.
Thank you. Just a quick report on our last meeting. The Finance and Audit Advisory Committee met on August 19th. We talked, there were basically 4 topics that evening. First of all, the committee voted to have me as be the chairman for this next year. The second was Karen gave us a report on SEB, which is the new employee benefits program for the for school employees. And she gave us an overview, kind of estimates of costs for the district and what she's looking at and implementing that program. And the details of our discussion are in your report. I think the takeaway that I'd like to share here is that our advisory committee, in our advisory capacity as a committee, we recommend highly that the board and the district review its policies about substitute teachers and all of those kinds of things that relate to SEB to see if we can mitigate the financial impact of this program on the district, because it's quite expensive, has the potential to be quite expensive. So there's that. We talked about the budget. Karen basically shared with us the budget presentation she gave to the school board in the meeting prior to that. So she shared with that, made that information available to our committee. And finally, we worked on the replacement levy. We talked about details about how it's actually levied, which I won't really share with you. I think you know all about how all of that works. We talked about how to calculate what the levy is, should be, what we want to levy. There were 2 methods that we went back and forth about and decided that they kind of need to be simultaneously used as we think about the levy. First is how what are the enrollment rates, what are tax rates, what are estimates for assessed values, that approach to see what can be levied, what taxpayers, what those rates would be. The second thing that we need to also look at the same time is what costs need to be covered by the levy. And we're going to spend some more time on that in the next couple of meetings, but we did identify that salary and benefit costs need to be covered for staff that's not funded by the state. We needed to talk about underfunded sped costs, extracurricular activities and athletics are all covered by the levy. Professional development, what is that looking like for the next few years, what the state is going to cover versus what we want to do in our district. We talked about supplemental instructional support and of course these SEB costs, if they need to be included as part of the levy spending plan in the future, building improvements, supplies and technology, and any other district needs. So those are the things we're starting to look at that need to be covered by the levy that the district needs to include in its levy spending plan. So we set up 3 meetings for the next 3 consecutive Mondays to continue looking at this levy spending plan to stay on target to meet state and board deadlines over the next couple of months for presenting a levy. That's our report.
Any questions from the board?
I would just like to know if we are paying SEB or we're assisting in paying SEB to employees, is that considered fall under enrichment, the term enrichment?
Not necessarily.
Okay.
Is that it?
Thank you. Please thank the committee, and thank you for heading that up again this year.
No problem. Thanks.
Actually, we have one more.
Oh, sorry,
Not
Leslie.
nec- That's okay.
Oh,
No,
sorry.
no, it's not necessarily for you, but it's just regarding what's covered under the levy and what is not. Is that, I can't remember, is that something OSPI is going to be determining for us, or?
On the levy, we do have to submit a levy proposal of how we're spending both in program and by object.
Right.
And we have to submit that prior to creating a resolution.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions? No.
Well, I have a follow-up now that
Yeah.
Leslie asked. Sorry, and this is going to have to be for her. Do we have any kind of timeline? Is OSPI giving us a timeline on what the turnaround is on reviewing that, since we're going to be under our
I
own?
heard today that the turnover is fairly quick, that they're trying to expedite, and I heard that recently it was a 3-day turnover.
Okay,
It's not months, it's pretty fast turnover.
okay.
Marcia?
And I'm just so impressed with the committee that is working now. They're all engaged and committed to meaningful work. So, and they're not shy. So, I mean, they're rich conversations, and it is as it should be.
There's been very good attendance and
Yes.
and very engaged questions.
Yes.
And from very knowledgeable people, and
And doing homework, too.
I know, right? Yes, keeps us on our toes. So,
Thank you.
thank you very much.
Okay.
We will move into the capital projects update. I will ask Mr. Jeff Green and team to present an update and do the big reveal.
She's been there.
Welcome back to the school year. We've been working all summer with some amazing principals on 4 amazing schools. And we can't tell you, they've hung with us, those 4 principals, and I don't know how they stand Jeff and me, but they seem to work through it anyhow. See, they know. We're really excited to have the principals are actually going to unveil their boards tonight. We're excited about that. We've worked really hard on that over the summer, and we still have a lot more to go. So although we're going to see some facades and kind of what the buildings are going to look like, there's still a lot of work to do over the next few months before we go out to bid. You know, you might even see some stuff that's really spicy. That'll make sense later.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here this evening. Although this is very exciting, you have to remember how early we are in the process. So we actually have to finish the design, get the documents in, get them bid, and get them constructed. So we're maybe at the 20% gateway. But it's a very impressive amount of work that's gotten done in a short period of time. We're very excited to have images to show you. So we don't have all 4 schools done. So we're kind of, the 2 city schools required us to get to this point, and the other ones we just drug along. And so Evergreen is ready, and Ardendale's not quite ready yet. So we expect it to be ready shortly. In my part of the report, I get the technical, boring parts of the report. So if you look at Pioneer, which is going to be our first school under construction, we've actually finished the next phase of design, which is called design development. And there's a lot of technical documents that come in and cost estimate that will be coming in next week on that project. But all projects are on track. So we're on budget and we're on schedule on all projects at this point. A lot has to happen every day to keep us there. So we are in land use planning with the city. TCF Architecture is preparing documents for a building permit submittal later in this month. And we will be contracting for constructability services, which is a state-required services for Evergreen and Ardendale. It's not required on the other 2 projects, but consistent with what we've been doing, all the projects will be treated equally. So we'll use the same process on all of the projects. And we expect to be out to bid in November, opening bids in December on the Pioneer project. Integris is working on Elementary 9, and we've made a submittal to the Design Review Board, abbreviated the DRB, and we have a hearing on September 26th, so we will not be here to share with you. It's at the same time as this meeting. I think it's 5 to 6:30. So we'll be in that meeting on that day, and we'll be missing your board meeting. They're also, Integris is also doing the Ardendale project, and we have meetings tomorrow. So we say we don't, on all of the projects, we've waited until we have all of the problems solved so that we're pretty convinced that what we show is something that we can actually get constructed. And we've had a couple of issues that have taken just a little longer at Ardendale to get resolved, so we're not quite there ready to share an image with you tonight. TCF did Evergreen, and Evergreen, so the two county projects have SEPA process for their land use, and both those SEPA scoping documents have been published. And Evergreen, we do have an image to show you for Evergreen today. There is a well out there on that project, and we think we have a resolution on all the well issues. There's still a couple of little things and an application to the Department of Ecology that has to be made concurrent with our building permit application. But it doesn't look like there's any issue there that's would cause us to alter the plans at Evergreen. So as far as our meetings go, we have a meeting tonight with the PTA at Ardendale, and so I'll be leaving at 6:40 to attend that. And we have a meeting with the staff at Evergreen on the morning of the 19th.
Are we ready for the big reveal? We're really excited.
Actually, so I will get out of the way so that you can do the big reveal with Ron.
So,
Real quick, these will be available on the website after the meeting, right?
right, I've
Okay.
got a little, yeah.
Sorry.
Talk a
if I
little bit
stole
more
thunder, I
about.
apologize.
So, let's see. Can you find your poster? We'll get out of Who wants to go first?
Do they need to speak with the mic, or are that you're going to be able to pick them up?
It's okay.
Okay, let us know if that helps.
Let's start here.
Evergreen. All right, so the reference to spicy. We were looking at colors, and I kind of had this one color that I really liked, and I bent down to look at the color, and the name is Spicy Hue. HB. How fitting. By the way, that was not my nickname in college.
It will forever be now.
Yeah.
So here we go.
Wow.
Very pretty. Thanks a lot.
Oh, yeah.
It's awkward.
Hey, Hugh, you want to show the audience? And do it?
We'll do that. We'll do the reveal view, and then this direction.
Very nice.
Stand to the side.
So much nicer than the
Oh
last
my
one.
goodness. Want to just hold it?
Yeah.
They're all a lot nicer than a month ago.
I don't have the hard
Back around, so, because I want to see the cool.
Yeah, so they'll be on the website. We'll get them over to you here in just a minute.
Okay, and here's Pioneer.
Wow. Wow, how different that looks.
Is that 2 stories?
It's 2 stories on that side, and then the original building's 1 story, so it's mostly 2.
Daylight vista?
That's one happy smile.
It's beautiful.
It
It's beautiful.
And school number 9.
Looks great.
Awesome. It also looks a little spicy Hue.
I would just,
Spicy.
I would just offer a note. On each of those, you will see in the lower left corner a site plan that shows where the building goes on the site and how it fits. In the lower right-hand corner will be basically the design of the building, where the classrooms go. And so I certainly invite you. You can read the fine print, but you'll get also a chance to look at the details and the work that's been done. It's very, very impressive.
You guys were all part of that, so I mean, this is a big piece of each one of the principals had a lot of input on how classrooms lay out, the look of the building. So again, we cannot thank the principal group enough, and Jessica's not here, So we want to make sure to include how much these buildings are coming along, because without them, they really wouldn't be the amazing schools they're going to be. Thank you.
So the intent is that these boards would go up, Amy will be distributing these boards to various places around town. So we want the community to see what it is the district's planning to do. These link to the district webpage for construction, which will be active at midnight.
Yeah, in an hour.
In an hour.
In an hour, it's over.
And if you have an app, that actually gets you there.
Right.
So.
Right, they have QR codes as well, so.
Nice.
So, yeah, and I can talk more about that if you want to, about where you're going to be, so I have notes, so.
Awesome.
Actually, before we move on to that, is there any questions from the board to Jeff or to Patrick or the principals about the sites, schools?
It's too exciting. It's beautiful.
very
Thank
much.
you for all the work. I mean, it's stunning.
I have one for either Patrick or Jeff. You don't need to go into great detail, but would you explain a little bit, because each school looks a little bit different, why they look different, and why they're the same?
Actually, and that's a great question. So all of the schools are based on the same theory of learning and the same educational specification. They're all based on the same budget for the building portion, so they have differentiated budgets for the site. So the intent here is that we're creating equity across the entire district platform. However, one school is an addition, so that's Pioneer, and it's in the city. The other school is a new school in the city, so they have completely different design codes that govern those two projects. And then we have a school that has a smaller program, so we adapted the standard program, which is about 65 to 70,000 square feet. We adapted it to a smaller program at Evergreen, so it has a smaller program. And which leaves us, Ardendale is the only one that didn't have a huge amount of design criteria and is the standard size. But the two communities, so the Evergreen community and the Ardendale community, were heavily involved in the spring discussing their community and how it differentiates from every other community. And so there's some of their community gets embedded in the two schools that didn't have a community, because we had the same architects and we had all the principals working together. And some of it just differentiated slightly between what one community wanted and their values and what the other community wanted and their values. So that's not in the, it's the same kit of parts everywhere, but the kit of parts go together slightly differently in different parts of the community. So.
Thank you.
Yeah, I have a question for Hugh, just only because you're the only one of the three that has the existing school now. How's the feeling amongst the staff and the community out there? What's the?
Oh, it's just very
What's the
exciting. I
vibe?
still have to like pinch myself, right? I forget, and I feel like it's such a great opportunity. It's going to be a great opportunity for our kids to, because we have the additional site. I mean, I feel really blessed. I know, Jessica, that's going to be a real challenge at Ardendale to build on site and those challenges. So we just keep thinking of like Bob the Builder, and our kids are going to get to go look and see and be part of, that in a safe way, Patrick. We won't just take them over there on a field trip, but
We actually look forward to that part
That's
of
gonna be the new
the
playground.
educational experience, and we've already had some conversations a little bit around how we do that at Pioneer, and we hope to expand that to all the schools. So we're looking to engaging the kids into this process as well, safely.
But like our parents are so excited about it, and we're hoping to, have a great opportunity to have some space in there where we can open our building for community needs and things. So we're keeping our fingers crossed for bids and how all of that rolls out.
Awesome. Well, I'm sure we're all, I speak for all of us, just really excited for you, because when you gave me a tour, it was way back before there was even any funding for a potential new building. So, and so the tour consisted of, we have 42 people in this little, no, it wasn't that bad, but just all the struggles that were happening and all the things that, like the wish list of all the staff.
Yeah.
And so it's really fun to see the, the drawing.
Our SLP is so excited that she won't be in a kiln room.
Exactly.
Right, so.
So, awesome. Thanks.
Thank you.
Can you turn that around, Evergreen?
You want to see that again?
Yeah,
I wanna
we
look
just
at
saw
that
it
again.
for a minute.
This is
Beautiful.
Stacy Hughes. Marcia, did you have a question, or just wanted to see?
No, I just wanted to be able to,
Dr. Jarvis, did you have a statement or a question?
We were having a little test of people, whether, given the fact that the Boys and Girls Club has been converted to the annex and then it's part of that new building, can you actually identify in that rendering where the Boys and Girls Club is? And what you're looking at. So I asked that without answering it, just a little question,
We'll see if the board can do it. Can you turn it toward the board now that you got it set there? I want to see if anyone can guess where the Boys and Girls Club is in that picture.
What part of the Boys and Girls Club?
So where is the Boys and Girls Club? And I asked the question, I guess, behind that is that our commitment to the community was to build 4 schools. And when we bought the Boys and Girls Club, as I said earlier, it's been a godsend already. But we wanted to make sure that the new school really was the new school, that it was a beautiful new school. It was full 30 classrooms and would serve all the kids with all the amenities. So it's been, I guess, just a little bit of a personal interest to say it's not an addition to the Boys and Girls Club. The Boys and Girls Club has been incorporated into a beautiful design and plan, but can you find it? So that was the challenge. Anybody want to point out where it is?
The
Board member?
Well, I mean, the frontage,
right.
which is the main building, but again, as you said, it was just, the design has just been incorporated so beautifully. It's seamless, and that's what's so incredible about it, right?
So I'm going to guess.
Go ahead.
I'm going to guess that the front of the Boys and Girls Club is that far gray-black wall on the left. That was the front. No?
That's I'm guessing the road is on the left of the picture.
To the right of it.
And the track is to the right, and that piece on the left is the original building.
So what you're looking at on
So
the far
the
left
door is on the behind.
is really the
guessing.
end of the Boys and Girls Club, which would be the north end.
The north end. That's awesome.
Well, that's
It's
what
deceiving.
That's
It
what it
is.
is. That's
It's
awesome.
exactly the
Far
same
end.
on the side.
And
It's awesome.
everything that you're looking at, that's, so you will not have trouble finding the entrance to this school. It's
Right.
all new, and what you're staring at is literally the entrance to the school. And everything on the right side is the bulk of 20-plus classrooms.
That's a fun thing.
So it's a beautiful new school, and it's fulfilling that contract with the community. But we did get a jump start, and those classrooms are serving us beautifully. Just one little technical piece. We were talking about it earlier, but in terms of opening the new school, it will be phased. So you're going to build the new school, and then you've got some work to do in the old part, the Boys and Girls Club part. So that's all going to be part of the complexity of what can we finish and in what order and how fast. We're going to have lots of fun as each of these projects develop. But this one will be the first of the 4. So.
Well, thank you, and congratulations on getting to where we are. I know it's a lot of work, and just the tip of the iceberg probably on what's ahead. I sit here and think about how excited I am about these schools right here, but I'm equally excited about our other schools that are existing that are going to have relief of overcrowding. Science is going to go off the cart and back into classrooms when kids move over to these schools. So I'm as excited about seeing these new schools. I'm so excited for our existing schools as well and what's going to happen there. So, yay.
Thank you.
So
Now, on to how the heck does our community find about this?
I just wanted to let you know that we are super pleased with how these posters turned out. We produced these low budget in-house actually, so we have many more to make tomorrow now that this has been an official reveal. So we have plans to take these out into our community, to our businesses and churches and the libraries, and whoever will have a poster will bring our easel and posters so that they can be available for people to look at. So if there's anyone out there in our viewing community tonight that might have a location, they can certainly email info@psd401.net and they can connect with us and we can bring a poster out. We're also creating, once we get the Artendale rendering, we will have a poster where we'll have a 4-up, we'll call it. So there'll be 4 on one poster for each
Oh,
one.
good.
So,
Oh, great.
and that will be placed in other locations. But each school will also get that 4-up poster, and then this Evergreen will get its poster, and let's see, Pioneer will have their poster. So school number 9 will be in our office. So we also have posters. As we mentioned, Dr. Jarvis is going out into the community, so he's bringing those with him. And then we're also going to be at a few upcoming community events with our posters. So we have Sup in the Harbor on the 22nd of September. We'll be at the Education Foundation breakfast and lunch on the 25th. And then I heard about the Penn Met Scarecrow. So we're going to be, we have a booth there. And also the Fish Bowl. Can't forget the Fish Bowl. So coming up, these events, we want to be there just so we can be available to answer questions and to show what we've come up with so far in the process. Also want to mention that we have updated our school construction website as of today and tonight. So these renderings are going on that site shortly. We are working on some social media posts that contain our renderings going out tonight. We have a message to all of our staff directing them to our website since they weren't able to be here at the board meeting tonight, although maybe they are at home, not quite sure. That will go out tonight as well to our staff, and then tomorrow a message to our families with the same message. We have our next issue of The Compass will be published in early October, and so we have a full spread in that publication as well as a front cover that is all about construction. And finally, we had a chance to meet with a reporter with Key Peninsula News. And so we have a very large story coming out October 1st that is profiling our new Evergreen Elementary School as well as our new principal there. Of the new school, not new principal, but Spicy Hugh. So do you have any questions for me about our plans for communications?
You might want to put the farm tour the first Saturday in October, at least the Evergreen picture, at the Long Branch Improvement Club. That's where the fiber art show, and it will be inside, and so people can walk by and see
right.
that. So
We'll put that on the calendar.
yeah, and I can get you more.
Okay.
And I don't know if you can put them in the Civic Center, but it might be a good place. And with realtors, I don't know if you can get them, maybe that flyer with all 4.
He's meeting with them.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Good.
Oh,
Yeah,
See?
anyway. Yeah.
all right.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Excellent. Okay, we will move on to new business, Resolution 19-13. Prior to going into the motion, I'm going to please ask Dr. Jarvis to give us an overview of the exchange of real property.
Thank you, Madam President. I think first in my comments would be more of a process explanation of what is about to be asked of you. And then the second part of that will go into the detail of the agreement. We are in the position that we own a piece of property, and we have leased that piece of property for quite some time to Penn Met Parks. Penn Met Parks has used part of that property for the dog park. Part of it is made up of trails and wetlands, trails throughout the wetlands. But the Busage property belongs to us, and Penn Met Parks has been using it. At the same time, we have in turn been leasing a piece of property from Penn Met Parks, which is the field and the track and the oval behind Pioneer Elementary School, behind the Boys and Girls Club, whichever you prefer. Interestingly enough, the Busage property in total is just under 95 acres, and the oval behind Pioneer is just under 10 acres. The 10 acres is developed, it has a track, it has a field. We have engaged in conversation which led to an agreement which we're asking you to approve. The Penn Met Board is asked to approve the agreement on their behalf on Tuesday evening on the 17th. And the two agencies, being public agencies, are allowed to acquire and dispose of property between them because they're both public agencies and the rules are different. So instead of what might happen if we were selling a piece of property or out to buy a piece of property, we really operate under different rules. But I'd like to basically put in front of you that both agencies will be asked to approve the agreement to exchange these properties, and I'll go into details shortly. And then the two agencies will have, according to this agreement, 45 days in which each agency, and there are some other things to be put in place to make sure that the right things happen, and I'll describe some of those as the conditions that exist within the agreement. The short version is I not only recommend, I strongly recommend the approval of this agreement, which allows us to go ahead and exchange the two properties. What I'd like to then go into is some of the details, and I think the public would be interested, and certainly staff, but so that you know what we've worked. We have worked for roughly the last at least 3 months. I didn't try to figure it out with our attorneys. I don't mean to offend them, but ad nauseum. We have worked with our attorneys to try to make sure that we're doing it correctly and Penn Met is doing it correctly, and we're getting what we need to. So I'd like to describe to you first some issues about the Busich property and some details about the Busich property. I mentioned that it's just under 95 acres. Roughly 20 acres of that, which would be in the northeast corner of that property. There's actually a sketch in your agreement, but the 20 acres in the northeast is buildable. It's got land that in which you could build something and say this will meet the codes, and we'll figure out all the details as you're watching with the work that's being done here. But the other 75 acres is essentially a variety of class of wetlands. Some of them the maximum wetlands, some of them slightly less. But wetlands offer an interesting challenge. They offer the challenge that A, you can't build in the wetlands, and B, you have to have a buffer of so many feet depending on the type of wetlands. So we made the decision earlier this year that was not an appropriate site for multiple reasons for an elementary school at this time. But the property certainly is still ours. So what we have done and what we've negotiated in this case is to keep the 20 acres that's buildable and to trade with Penn Met Parks the other 74.88 roughly acres. I don't think anybody's here from Penn Met. We had invited, oh, you are here. Then I'll say some things, but I won't put you on the spot, but we want to be at each other's, because part of it is what Glenn Akromoff and I think to quote him, the property, the 74.88 acres is parks type property. It's trails. It is the dog park. It has the kind of property that's not going to be developed. It's going to be retained for the use of the community, and the 20 acres that we would retain really does allow us to make decisions in the future. As you know, I've promised you a long-range plan, and the long-range plan will try to take into consideration virtually all of our needs and at least put them in a sequence and a priority. I would not want to say this is what that property is being reserved for, because it's going to belong to the school district and do whatever the board of directors wants to do in 1 year or 10 years or 50 years from now. That's up to the board and whatever the circumstances are. But I would note that that 20 acres is situated in an area that's becoming more and more industrial. You're watching the progress on the building and the very large site and what's going to be built there. The prison is just down the road. The fire department is next door. I would at least suggest that it will be less and less probably the site that you would look at for housing a school. I don't want to close any doors. It may be by necessity the right site, but I would suggest that one of the interests of the school district long-term would be where would we put things like a maintenance shop and a bus garage once ours are completely worn out. Some would argue that they're completely worn out now, but we haven't got any money or opportunity to rebuild them. But that will be part of a question down the road. And part of the genesis behind that particular thought is not only the location that would be appropriate, but that this site gets more and more complex as you look at what are you going to do eventually with Peninsula High School. What's the water situation and what can be supported on this site with both a high school and elementary school, a bus garage, a maintenance shop, and a district office. So those kind of decisions are down the road, but I wanted to, I guess, put enough information there to suggest that's why we want to retain that 20 acres. Then comes the question as we work with PennMet Part is, let's assume for a minute that they acquire the 74 plus acres and we keep the 20. How do we make that work in this time period in which we don't have any plans? So one of the components in this agreement is that we would be willing to lease to PennMet Parks, just as right now they're leasing the whole 95 acres. We would be willing to lease to them those 20 acres with the proviso that that lease can be terminated anytime we need the property for anything. That's strictly a board decision, and that would be in there to say that's ours, and we'll be glad to lease it to you until we make some other determination. A second part that affects PennMet if they purchase or acquire this property in exchange is, do they have the easement? If people still want to park their car in the fire lane and walk their dog to the dog park, can they walk through our 20 acres? Is there an easement, and would there be an easement down the road to make sure that people can access that site? And we've agreed to that. We've agreed to that in a way that says that easement is flexible based on what the district needs. So we will guarantee you an easement, but we won't guarantee you where it is or how you get there from here. We need that flexibility in the design phase down the road. A third issue that comes up is, what if the district should, at some point in the future, want to sell that site? The short answer is that we would agree with PennMet Parks that A, we would let them know, and B, they would have a right to make an offer to us first. And if we proceed with some other buyer and we're determined to sell it, they would have a right of first refusal to be able to match that offer from some other party. Lastly would be I guess the fourth option, when it's time for us to build something on that site, if it's a school, if it's an educational facility, it's ours and we move ahead. That's the end of discussion. It's ours and we move ahead regardless, but if we were to build a maintenance shop, they have asked for at least to have a discussion, could they join us in a joint venture or a joint use, and that would depend entirely on A, what we were going to do, B, whether they have the money to join us and pay for their share, and C, whether that would work and we could have a mutual agreement. So we have agreed that that was reasonable to look and none of us know at that point whether we're talking 5 years or 20 years or 40 years down the road. So it really just keeps open that kind of partnership with Penn Met. And I'm gonna leave that to come back to some of your questions and more details on Busich site. But I want to switch then to the Penn Met property. The Penn Met property is the oval, and I think, Laura, you mentioned to the right of this, down the hill, is the track. It's a field. It sits in the way in the midst of Gig Harbor High School, Discovery Elementary, Henderson Bay High School, and now Pioneer Elementary School. And we are, in essence, dissolving the lines that separate those, and that's one master plan facility. This one makes sense for several reasons for us to own and acquire that property. First and foremost is because we use it now. We act as if it's ours. We lust after it. The reality is it's appropriate for the school district to own that property. Penn Met did their own examination relatively recently before they purchased the golf driving range as to whether they wanted to use that particular property, and they determined to pass on it. So interestingly enough, we have a situation where the school district passed on the use of Busich for our school, and they passed on the use of this, and it opened the door to us looking at an exchange. A second comment I would want to make is that in the construction and planning and permitting of Pioneer Elementary, this property becomes very, very valuable to us. And you might ask how? Well, one of the ways, besides just its being what it is that it extends a property we have, and that opens the door to a different set of calculations on water retention, drainage, and being a hillside site that we're building on, it makes a huge difference. You heard earlier Jeff talk about the fact that we were at one point looking at having to build vaults underground to store water. The acquisition of this site puts us in a very different position that we can go ahead with the drainage plan. I think some of you know that among other things, when you're planning a facility and a school, you have to count every tree. There's a tree count, and there's a set of codes governing what trees can be added, removed, how many trees you have to have. It works to our advantage to own that property. So whether it's drainage, whether it's water retention, whether it's the tree count or the boundary, you know that we've been wrestling with the city in terms of the number of parking places required by code, and we had to change for this year the use of the gymnasium at the annex because we didn't have enough parking to handle the large size use of the largest facility. So being able to acquire that property changes again the calculations on what we can do and how we can work on our parking, our boundaries, our buffer zones. So I emphasize that because that's part of the reason I use the terminology somewhat in jest, but that piece of property not only is valuable to us in terms of what it will be used for and what it does, but it fits in with the entire master plan, and it fits in perfectly at this moment that we're asking for a permit, and we're going to go in front of the design review board on the 26th, hoping to have one review, one meeting, one time. Our permit comes a day after we close some of the other preliminary work, and we are on the fastest track in the world for Pioneer Elementary School. And this piece is part of it. We didn't set out with saying we know that, but we set out pretty early knowing that it would be an advantage to us, and then it became more and more evident that it was just literally an essential part of what we need. So That gives you a little bit of an overview on the Busich site. I'll be happy to answer questions and the site. I would add two other pieces. Earlier I mentioned that being two public agencies, we have the ability to not do what we would do if we were outright selling a piece of property. We would have our values all established, and we would hire the appraisers and multiple appraisers if necessary, and then buyers would have all those opportunities. We're allowed to do that differently. We have an interesting situation in which you could look at it and say we would be exchanging almost 75 acres of property for just under 10 acres of property. And somebody could say, well, is that fair? The reality of what that 75 acres is and whether it's useful to the school district or not versus the 10 acres literally switches that one. The second point I would make is that if you were looking at the Penn Met side of it and you pulled up Pierce County's evaluations of school district property and Penn Met property is shaky at the best because nobody really knows and they're not public properties. But at this point, if you were to pull up the two valuations, that oval of just under 10 acres, the track and field, is valued higher than the 75 acres at the Busich property. So we have more acreage, they have more value, and the agreement in essence says that we will have a professional look at it and make sure that that balance really is appropriate to the two agencies. If for any reason it was not balanced in a proper way, then we would deal with that in this exchange of the two properties. So we think we've protected the public and the public interest on both agencies. We think we've got the best properties that end up in the right ownership. We know from a school district standpoint that this serves us very, very well. We were looking as an example at the transition from Pioneer, and as you plan the playgrounds in addition to the parking and the access of kids, how would Stephanie be able to access the nearby properties? We've already begun discussions with the high school about the kids accessing the turf field even this year and what's there. So being able to have that as part of our property and then build it in a way that all of it's part of how we build it and it's ours. Some of you know that there was a shed that burned down. Just a little complication, we can't rebuild our shed on their property, but we can rebuild our shed on our property. So little things that are not more than just aggravating, we really need to do this. So that's a long way of saying I heartily recommend that you consider this this agreement to exchange the two properties. It's legally tested, it's appropriate, it fits. The 45 days is tight. If we had probably everything we could ask for, the two agencies would love to have 90 days or 120 days. It simply doesn't work for us because of the permitting of Pioneer, and we're in a, like everything else to do with Pioneer, we're in a very tight time frame. Penn Met has very, I guess, gracefully said they will work with us on that, recognizing it's a tight timeline, but that really serves our need. On that, I think if I may, if I misrepresented Penn Met at all, Glenn is out. Glenn is out of town, and so Chuck has been, I don't know, volunteered or pressed into service. The last name Cazzetto is certainly familiar to all of you, and as a Chuck. Chuck, I don't know if you have any comments that you were asked to make or you'd like to make.
No, just to say that I don't want to speak loud enough, so if I have to, I can be. Just say that we haven't purchased the golf center property as of yet. Was the only note that I would have. We're still in the due diligence and feasibility process of that. We have the hearing examiner, and we have that time frame right now for them to make a decision. So, and that's a reliance on us making our decision, of course. So that would be our only note. Other than that, I'm just here to
take notes and answer questions, really. It didn't sound like you had any, so we do. I'm definitely open for them.
So within the agreement itself are pages and pages of things that you may have questions about, some of which I may be able to answer, hopefully most.
We'll move through the motion and then for questions during the
Yes,
discussion.
that would be appropriate.
Okay. With that, is there a motion to adopt Resolution 19-13, exchange of real property?
I'll make the motion.
Second.
Is there any discussion prior to the vote?
I'd like to say something. For me, this is, I think for members of the executive staff, they know I've been talking about this. Has been a long time coming for me. I first had a conversation with Terry Lee about this back in 2013, and I brought this back up to our previous board in 2014 with Superintendent Cuzzetto was here, and we tried to make it work, and some of the board members weren't real enthusiastic about it at the time, so it just got shelved. And then after this board, Sands Lori was elected 4 years ago, and then we brought in Rob. I brought it up to that board, and Rob said, I think we should do this. And everyone said, well, we're too new. We're still trying to learn our own job. We're not ready to move forward with this. And so then Art came on board last summer, and I don't think he'd been on very long, and already been his ear about, hey, we need to do this property swap. So I just think that this is a great win for the community, because I know talking with PennMet board members over the years, if I'm wrong about this, tell me, but I know some of them have a vision about having the Cushman Trail go all the way around and over the highway and through, and have this property be part of your long-range vision, to have Cushman go all the way from the Narrows to the, over there. So I think that I'm really, really excited that PennMet board is on board with this, no pun intended. But I think the community wins on this. I don't look at it as they get 75 and we get this or whatever. I just see this as a community win, and I'm really, really, really thrilled that they're working with you on this and that you're going to make this work. So I do hope the board will vote in favor of this. I'm really, really happy.
Marcia?
First of all, I'm thrilled that our community has voted to be able to improve our schools, which actually makes this conversation possible. And without our community, we probably wouldn't be here today. And, it's a necessity. I want to thank you, Dr. Jarvis, for clarifying very concisely the issues that we're facing. And also, my question is that I was reading the agreement, and the fact of the matter is PennMet Park's ability to lease the 20 acres is leasing it from the school district. That being said, I have two questions. Has PennMet Parks approved this agreement that we're looking at?
PennMet Parks is acting on this on the 17th of September at their next meeting, so that's Tuesday evening.
Okay, thank you. And you also explained, because we're both public entities, that there isn't a need to do a property appraisal, that you can exchange property for the benefit of two public entities. And so my only question is, why then in the resolution are we appraising property before we're finished? Just curious.
Our attorney, and I won't speak for their attorney, but the attorneys have talked back and forth. They felt that this was a protection for both boards. In essence, it was just an extra step to say, if you were to be challenged by a citizen who says you gave away something more valuable, how could you give away 75 acres in exchange for less than 10 acres and you did something wrong? So they really advised us to do this, to, in essence, look at the use and the exchange and be able to say this, in fact, is reasonable. And it wouldn't be what I would call a full appraisal if you were trying to sell it, but it would be adequate to both agencies to be able to say, in fact, due diligence was met.
Okay, yeah, because appraising either one of these is very difficult, so. Thank you for clarifying that.
Questions?
I just had a comment. I mean, I want to thank you as well, Dr. Jarvis and your team. Really well done as far as due diligence in the report. You answered all of my questions all at once, and it was lovely, and I appreciate it, and I appreciate the clarity. I also like what you said. I'm going to totally misquote you. But I also like what you said that, you know, we're getting what we need, they're getting what they need. I think PennMet is the perfect steward of those wetlands. I'm super excited about it. I think it's a beautiful partnership. I think that the exchange makes sense, and particularly because of the timing. The timing is just, it seems, you know, it seems like the timing has worked so well for us in this district, particularly with the Pioneer Elementary School and the need for that, the new needs that, because of that school being built on the property. So I'm excited. I think it's wonderful, and I thank you for all the work that you've done in such a short amount of time.
It's fun.
I'm glad you find it fun.
I just, having lived in the community for several years, I just think this is a win, a huge win for the community as a whole, both for the parks and for the district. So, and I echo everyone else's comments. I appreciate the way you were able to explain it very clearly. And I did appreciate being able to see the numbers. I mean, it does help it make more sense knowing the value and the use. But at the end of the day, I feel like it's, you know, if I own a lake and you own a field, now I build a golf course, and I want to build this, you know, water ski park, why wouldn't we trade? You know, so, right, because it's, what I have is invaluable.
Well,
great
what you have
analogy.
is invaluable to me, regardless of how
Great.
it's appraised by anyone else.
Great
So.
analogy.
Okay. I have a question. I don't recall seeing it in the agreement, but if Peninsula School District decided they were going to sell those 20 acres, they weren't going to be needed. Obviously, PennMet has that first right of refusal. But if they chose no, and we were to look for other purchasers, would there be a requirement for that other purchaser to have those easement rights like PennMet, like we're doing that with PennMet?
Yes. In fact, we've written that intentionally, that it be recorded so that it goes with the property.
Okay.
And that becomes a guarantee really for PennMet that they won't be suddenly be landlocked, and whoever owns that property wouldn't let them through. It also is flexible enough that if somebody were to buy that, they're not locked into a certain strip, but the easement has to be 10 feet away from something or other.
Okay.
It would be that they would have to agree on how people would walk across that property, and depending on the use.
Okay. And then I know that it was interesting when you said the shed burnt down, we can't rebuild it on the property because it's not our property. Talking with Tom Lacey this week, and he is very pleased about the thought of this because while the PennMet Parks is very, they partner very well with us and everything's fine, everything they do on that property, they have to go through PennMet. So we're eliminating that step for Gig Harbor and the Pioneer, so I think that's really great. And in terms of purchasing that property now, or not purchasing, excuse me, exchanging now versus earlier, you know, it just makes sense now.
Right.
There's a need for it now, and I think the value to us now is far greater because of what the needs are we have at Pioneer. And I'm super excited that the agreement was structured around being partners with PennMet, continued partners, because I think the more that the district can partner with other people in the community, such as PennMet, such as the city and all that, to help build what we need to build for our community and our kids, more power to us. I think those are good partnerships. So thank you. I echoed it, or I'm echoing what everyone else said. Thank you for
You're welcome.
working with PennMet to make this happen. So,
Thank you.
yeah. Okay, so any other discussions, questions? Any other comments, Dr. Jarvis?
I have, after you hopefully approve
Okay.
or vote, I have one comment.
Okay. Well, it has been moved by Leslie and seconded by David to adopt Resolution 19-13, Exchange of Real Property. All in favor say aye.
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 All opposed? The motion has been approved. It's in your hand.
I didn't want to inappropriately affect the vote, but during the bond campaign, one of the things I discovered is the there's an intense passion in this community for the dog park. There were people that I would say came really close to, I don't care so much about the kids, but what about the dog park, as we were considering the Busage site. So as we were contemplating working for these last few months on this, we had a surveyor out to stake out and figure out where those wetlands were, and we could update that as part of the agreement. At which I immediately got an email from a patron that said, you lied to me. You have a surveyor in there, and now you're going to build a school there. So I promptly returned the email and said, no, we're building the new school over here, and that's been decided. We're not. But I couldn't say anything about what the purpose was. So I knew there was a hanging question, which immediately brought another email that said, then why are you wasting my money with a surveyor? And my best answer at that point was I went and talked to Patrick, and I said, Patrick, would you go talk to our patron? Just assure her that the dog park will be fine, and that when this is taken care of, I think you'll be very happy. And we did that, and I hadn't heard any more from her, and now I'm going to be able to give her the final email that this is what was in the works and why the surveyor was on the property. But people keep a close eye on what we do and whether we're doing it well with the money. And again, I go back to the passion I saw for our four-footed friends in this community and the significance of that. So it's said with great humor, but also recognizing the seriousness to the community of it's important to a whole set of people. Thank you. And thank you for the compliments. It really, I think this one was a natural to work out the details and find a way of making it work. I do think that, and I had asked Glenn if any of you wish to be in the audience Tuesday night while the Penn Met Board considers that. I think they would welcome that and not see it as at all offensive. So it's just, I'll make that offer on behalf of Glenn because he is out of town at the moment, but he was gracious enough to say that would be very welcome.
And that meeting is Tuesday at?
Tuesday, September 17th, 6:15, the Gig Harbor City Chambers.
Okay. Excellent.
Thank you.
Again, thank you, and thank you for that, and thanks for being persistent with us to finally get there. Good time now. All right, move on to the consent agenda. Is there any discussion on the consent agenda prior to the vote? Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
I also move.
Is there a second?
Second.
It has been moved by Marcia and seconded by Lori to approve the consent agenda. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? The consent agenda has been approved. We now move into our study session, and I will ask Dr. Jarvis to start off by the study session with a discussion regarding the 2019-2020 board calendar.
I'm trying to reserve as much of your time as I possibly can. And I appreciate, Lori has been the one I think at times was put in a bind with her schedule and needing a month's lead time to bid, and all of you have been very generous about meeting some of our requirements when we added sessions for capital projects kind of issues and sell bonds. So I'm trying to do as best I can for you as a board to give you a planning calendar, and that would be point one. Point number two would be to take the next step on assuring you of some reports that need to come to you, whether they're annually or quarterly, and be able to make sure we cover some of those and at least have the time and the space reserved for that. And thirdly, given the fact that I have done some reorganization of departments such as the Learning and Innovation, to be able to provide a regular place on the agenda by which they can talk to you, and then they can fill in the things that they need most to share depending on the time of year and what's both topical and needs action. At the same, that's the, I'm sorry, which one?
DLI, is that what that
DLI. They're abbreviating their Department of Learning and Innovation as DLI.
Okay.
It took me about 5 times before I figured that out, but they did create that. I also, as you know, have changed the role for Dan Gregory and John Helwick this year. And previously, John has done the elementary and Dan has done the secondary. And each of them is now working with a strand. So we've tried to provide a report time where they can, in fact, report to you on the work that's underway in their domain and be able to do that in, again, there will be situations where they've got things that are timely and need to be brought to you. And there are other times that Dan and two assistants would like to be able to report to you the things that are happening and just keep you updated. So an example of that you'll see in red on December 17th or 18th would be normally you have one board meeting in December. And in this case, Jeff Green has alerted me to the fact that that would be the date in which they need board action on accepting a bid for the construction of Pioneer Elementary School. And so to give you plenty of lead time and your choice of one of 2 days. Any time of day would work, but it's one that we're pretty tight given the date of the permitting, given the dates of that have to unfold. We really need to bid that before that holiday week, and to ask you if you can make that work in one of those 2 dates, and if not, I don't know what to do, but that's my request.
And those are a Tuesday and a Wednesday. So would you like us to decide on that date tonight?
I really wrap it within the whole calendar, and there is absolutely no necessity to decide it tonight as much as it's a convenience for you to know which date and I guess the security of us knowing that we do have a very important special meeting.
Is everyone comfortable knowing their calendar now, or would you prefer to go back and look at calendars and get back to me by
I can let you know tomorrow.
Friday?
I don't have my work phone with me.
We can let you know.
By tomorrow, please, and then we'll just get that in there so that people can make work arrangements and holiday and whatnot. Okay. To be determined, but we'll get it quickly.
And therefore, basically, to say, as you look at this calendar, if there are specific requests, we'll know that, we'll fold it in. It doesn't mean to lock it down, because there certainly will be things that come up, but I think it does give us something we didn't have this last year, and that's a much more thorough reporting calendar for your benefit.
Thank you.
Questions?
So, just kind of briefly reviewing the calendar and the different topics. Thank you for including some of our programs like CTE, special programs, highly capable, and all of that. I would like to know a little bit more, not tonight, but you can send it in an email if you prefer, what the DLI quarterly data reports are going to look like, what can we expect. Also, what kind of content can we expect from the assistant superintendents? How are they going to be giving us information? What kind of information? I guess I'm wondering, I'm assuming it's around student achievement, and so what that's going to look like. And also, if you are open to having other types of suggestions, things that maybe the board should be monitoring, but maybe I'm missing it or just not seeing it right now. I would like to see a human resource report at some point, certain maintenance and facility plan. I don't know if I'm missing that. It's kind of small. Just off the top of my head is a few suggestions and where that may fit.
Are you asking for it now?
No,
or-
no, no.
okay,
These are just
all right.
things that I'm sort of popping up and would like you to take into consideration.
Just a general statement. So DLI, Learning and Innovation, has been working already, looking at what do they need and what do they want to share with you. We have a new assessment director, and how do they introduce James in a sense of starting right by jumping in on what the kind of reports that they want to present and things that they're looking at. So I think you're going to be really pleased with some of the detail that emerges for Dan and John. They can speak for themselves, but they already have some of the ideas. We're going to need to know things like how do we want to handle our SIP plans this year.
Yeah, because I noticed they're not on here.
And so there will be those that will be, between us, we'll figure out some of the details, but by creating the opportunities, it gives us a much better chance to just have that as an automatic thing of how we do business.
Marcia?
One thing, and I'm not going to be here the whole year, but to add on to Leslie's list of things to do, since I've been on the board, we have not had any report from transportation and or food service. And I just think the overview, it doesn't have to be a 45-minute report, but looking at it so the whole board has the same operating level and understanding of what it is we're doing.
We did have a food service report a while back when they talked about the different types of foods and what they were introducing and changing. Is that the kind of report you're looking for?
Yes,
Okay.
and what's going on now, because actually I think the rules are changing again
Yeah,
from everything I've read, and keeping us apprised of whether ketchup is a vegetable or
But
whatever.
something like
Yeah,
that.
mhm.
Excellent.
I'm going to go ahead and speak for a second for Karen. She's here and she can countermand what I'm going to say, but I think both the transportation and food service people would be thrilled. I think they would be absolutely thrilled to get a chance to share with you. You get some outstanding service from those people, and they don't get much recognition, so just being able to report to you what they're doing and working on would also be a way of honoring them for some great work that they do.
I bet both would have some pretty good stories for us, too.
Always entertaining.
Right.
And I think just a suggestion for the board as a whole, when we look at our calendar and we're kind of trying to figure out presentations or reports that we want to see, monitoring and accountability is something that we do as a board, and what does that look like when we look at our strategic plan? Are there any reports or other things that we want to see that will help us understand the information better, to see if we're on track and meeting our goals, that sort of thing? Those kind of suggestions may be also good, as well as the other reports that just sort of give us a really good overview. And some of these will be annually, some of them could be quarterly. I think that's something that is a conversation we can have with Dr. Jarvis and the staff. Because another one that I just thought of is early learning. What does that look like, and the impacts and that sort of thing? So.
And I think that if we move forward with the action plan, the 2019-20 action plan, there will be some obvious reports that come out of that I think would be good to monitor over the course of the year, since that's when the goals were targeted for. So, Lori, anything?
No.
David, Marcia, any other comments? Dr. Jarvis?
No, this is the really, I guess, important next step for getting us organized for the year. And I guess I dropped back not to overemphasize the capital, but the capital projects this year in some ways is going to be that 900-pound gorilla that demands time and demands energy. But our day job, so to speak, is everything you're looking at here, and we really want to make sure that we've done that justice and not get it lost in a year of all the planning and the permitting and the bid openings and the bid awards and the beginning of construction and the joy of our reporting of what the schools look like. So I just thank you for this, because I do consider you I guess the the least paid volunteers in the community and the hours that are demanded, and say thank you on behalf of the school district, because we need that time with you. Thank you.
Well, thank you for pulling this together. I think it'll be very good for the board to know, and good heads up, and also for your staff and teachers to know when they will be looking to give information. So great for you, and I look forward to it evolving over the next however time frame. Okay, with that, we will move on to 7.2 board self-assessment. So this is a continuation of our board retreat that we had back in, when was it, July 25th?
Mm-hmm.
So we, as a board, we had taken the assessment test, which is put out by WASDA last year, and we had decided as a board to take that again, and it's really a tool for us to look at our, assess our progress, help us achieve better student learning objectives and goals, and it's really a good tool for us to look at this year after year. And so we will be moving forward with that. I've got 2 timelines, and I have not received a confirmation from the WASDA representatives who will be coming to a follow-up board meeting after we take the assessment to help us interpret and analyze the data from that. So having said that, does anyone have preference one or the other in terms of doing the assessment in September and having a follow-up at the October 10th study session, or doing the assessment in later in October and having the at the study session, that proposed study session when we're at the WASDA conference?
Oh, I would prefer not to do it at the WASDA conference, so, or the other 2. I'm open to.
Is everyone, does anyone have thoughts on having it one or the other, or are they fine with both?
The October 10th study session seems pretty fast. I
They
mean, it's like
actually-
45 pages, the assessment when it comes out.
Right, and we're
finally.
giving you 2 weeks to do the assessment, and
I'm
then it
not
takes
worried
them
about that, but-
48 hours to turn it around at WASDA. So
Right.
they're,
No,
they
I
can be
get that
fully
part.
prepared.
I guess I'm good with either one.
Okay,
Yeah.
David, either one?
I prefer October. I don't think the WASDA conference is appropriate time to do it.
Okay,
I'd be willing to do it in November sometimes, just not during the WASDA conference.
okay.
I would agree with
And
that.
I-
because
I agree with what David said. I mean, I'm
Yeah.
fine with November, just not during
Yeah,
the
I
WASDA
mean, we
conference.
can take it in October and get the assessment later. It doesn't have to be, I mean, we could take it in the next 2 weeks and have the assessment on a different date than October 7th is all I'm saying.
I like that.
Yeah,
Okay,
see what I'm saying?
okay.
Um,
So I was trying to line it up with our current meetings. So we potentially may have another meeting then to add, is that?
No, the last one we saw was done by, that was actually presented as a part of a public meeting was when Chuck was still superintendent, and I think he displayed that or something similar, and then we did an assessment, we had a year that we didn't do an assessment, and then move forward. We did it last year, and then we have this year, so.
I would
I have
prefer to
3
do
years.
it during a study session, and so
I
our
agree.
next study session is October 10th. And then our next one, unless we schedule the December 17th or 18th, which is going to be a, special meeting for Pioneer bids, is in January. So if we want to wait that long, that's fine. I can ask WASDA if they're comfortable with the January timeframe, but that would be our next study session if October is too soon, which it sounds like it is.
Well, and couldn't we have it as a part of the November 11th, 14th?
That's a regular meeting,
I know,
and I don't
but-
know that that's necessarily a good, I mean,
We could do it at the
So-
end of,
I think that I'm fine with October 10th. I think that October 14th is, I mean, depending on how long the reports go, I'm fine with that. I think
October 24th, you mean?
I was looking at November.
Or
sorry,
November 14th?
I'm open to having a study session for that, if we can loop it in with something else. I don't know that that should be the only thing on the agenda as a study session.
So you're adding a meeting then?
If I'm fine with
In
it,
December.
I'm open to it, is what I'm saying. So it really is dependent on how
Okay.
the other board members feel about that.
Okay. Lori, do you have any thoughts chiming in?
Well, I would be happy to do it at the earlier date. There is a small possibility that I will not be here for the October 10th meeting, so
Okay.
that seems like not
And that's
ideal.
everything.
Yeah.
Yeah. We wanted you to be
So-
part of that
When will you know
discussion.
that?
Could we meet
Soon.
for an hour prior to the board meeting?
So it'll be a special
On the
session
14th?
Prior to?
I mean, as opposed to trying to set another meeting date?
Well, in fact, if I am gone that day, I would be here in the afternoon, the evening
the
that I'm
10th?
not here, yes. If I.
I was thinking about November
Or
14th.
Or November.
So it sounds like there's possibility of having an additional
only
hour
have one
study
meeting.
session. We could bump it out to January. What I'm gonna do now is go back to WASDA and ask some availability dates from them, and then go back and propose some to the board, and we'll move forward with that. The assessment time period, I will put that link out there, and I ask that you do it in the next, or whatever, the 2-week time period, just so we get it done and make sure we all do it. And I have included also the Washington Schools Board Standards online, or this online tool if you want to read it online, but booklet that the assessment is actually based off of. The assessment, just for more of FYI, is created by board members, for board members, to make us better. And this is what if you want to have that backup material on what the assessment is based on, it's available to you. Don't have to read it to take the assessment though, but it's there. All right, any other questions or comments on board assessment?
The only thing that I would mention, because I think these standards are important, it also is the basis for nominating yourself for a board of distinction, and sort of following some of that criteria that they base that on meeting these standards. So it might be a good basis for moving forward, you know, over the next 3 or 4 years.
Also, okay, any other? Okay, great. Look for that link, and happy assessing. All right. What else do we call it? 7.3, 2019-2020 action plan. I'll ask Dr. Jarvis to lead us in discussion on the action plan for the upcoming school year that we're in.
What I've presented to you is probably I'll describe as an interesting hybrid. It's a hybrid of some work that you began as a board in April of 2018, as you were looking at some preliminary strategic planning and some potential and possible goals. Some work that the Cabinet and I have been working on throughout this year. The development of the Peninsula Promise, as you've heard that presented, and what it represents. It represents a vision and a direction, and then begs the question of how are you going to get there and what steps are being taken this year. So I present this as an action plan, and I tied it with the Peninsula Promise to I guess, tell the world that that is part of the pursuit of that promise. So it was an attempt to take the goals and recognize that somewhere down the road the board will be interested in doing a more complete strategic planning, but in the interim not go without goals, and so I've made use of your goals, your draft goals. We've then converted those to action targets of things that we have done, are doing, will do during this year, and to represent the really significant progress in that direction. And then something that I think several of you have talked about one way or another, and that is as measured by what? So in some cases, as measured by something that we have to develop a baseline. We don't have a great baseline on our social emotional and some of the elements. And we have to figure out, and we've talked about developing some surveys. As we talked about the healthy youth survey, and we talked about whether it was the detail of kids vaping or suicide attempts, et cetera, to recognize that we need to develop some opportunities to gather information from our kids, from our parents, and be able to present that and begin the process of working steadily towards the improvement. So you see that. You also see some very pragmatic pieces. You have approved not only the construction of Pioneer, but Pioneer to be a magnet school. And that means that in this year we have to develop the theme, the concepts, the pragmatic, what will teachers be working with, and to do that literally in this first half of the year of getting Pioneer prepared, so, and then adding teachers and children, and then saying we now have curriculum and concepts and vision and teachers and kids, and we're ready to roll as a school. So I present to you, and I won't really wander through each of the goals as much as to say to you that we have revisited your goals. We've added the targets out of both the Peninsula Promise and the action plan and activities underway, and tried to add to that in, as you've approved now, or developed the concept of here's an annual calendar and people coming to make reports, to fill in those blanks with the very things that we're working on. So if that's district financial health measures, and be able to do that as part of the management and effective resource strategies. We've talked openly about the fact that under the new McCleary funding system, not only will we be facing some new questions as in the levy and it's both a replacement levy and an enrichment levy, but fewer resources to be able to say, I want to do this. All right, what has to go and where we're going to get the resources, how we're doing that. I want to just make a side note that had you had the opportunity in this week at the cabinet and at the meeting with all levels of the principals, I think you would have been pleased to see the teamwork that's evolving in terms of working on some questions that are in front of us as do we continue something we've been doing, or do we discontinue? If we discontinue, what serves the staff well, and how do we do that? When do we do that? How do we make better use of some of the measurements? So I don't want to derail this conversation as much by reference that that's already underway to try to get better and better of how do we make decisions? Where do those decisions come from? Do they fit with our vision? And then what are we doing to measure them and begin that process of reporting, and doing that in a way that says this is a whole district effort. It starts with board goals and directions. It works its way through the organization style, and along the way, how do you convert the central office and the transformation to leadership and support system, and how do we recognize that in our new funding system that we have to do business differently. So I dump all of the kind of in a back up a truck and say, here it is, but in a way that I hope makes sense to you as an action plan for this school year, as the beginning of a set of a blueprint for the way we do business, and really very functional to the work that has to be done this year, as well as meeting our desires on some places to go before we sleep.
Thank you.
I didn't mean to wax poetic as much.
Okay, thank you for pulling this together and working with the goals that we did have in place, and putting some things out there that we can look at specifically for this next year. I know that was a lot to do, but I appreciate your willingness to do that, so thank you. With that, may I please open it up for comments, questions on the action plan that is proposed?
So are we supposed to make suggestions or?
Yeah,
Okay.
I believe we want feedback as we
Okay.
continue to develop this.
Enable and support innovative curriculum and programs. So I think as a board, we want to look at what those, not just the process, but what the outcomes are. So maybe one of those things that we add to the calendar is a review of our curriculum and programs. How are they working? Where did we start? Why did, a quick refresher is, why we changed it. As an example, our math program that we recently adopted, 2 years ago, was it? Something like that, a new math curriculum. And so what does that look like now? And how is it doing what we hoped? What are those outcomes? And that's just one example, but just.
My answer is yes, yes, and yes.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Really, truly, that's one of the challenges for, I think, all school systems.
Sure.
What you start seems to run forever, and then you want to add to it until people just revolt with too much on their backs. So
Right.
how do we analyze? That's when I mentioned, without really going into detail, the work that was being done the last
Yeah.
few days. That's exactly one of the analysis of here's something we started, but it also needs to come before you as we look at where do you want to go, and here's a great idea, but do you really see that as a great idea? It's something you want to carry through.
And then we'll come back to you
Okay,
though.
that's fine.
Marcia?
I like what Leslie said as well, because we make decisions and move forward, but then looking at it from the other side, and I think you mentioned the math curriculum, and we were looking at changing some outcomes and improving math learning, and but we haven't had any feedback about, is that working, is it not working, and what about initiatives at the other grade span levels, because I think the middle school still needs to be addressed, has not been, so I would
Well,
agree.
and we did Reading Wonders a bunch of years ago, and.
Right.
Any other, Marcia, right now?
Oh, I thought I just got one.
Well, I thought you were just bringing
Okay,
the resolution.
let me just mention, in terms of the graduation rates and looking at subgroups, I really appreciate that measurement, and would be very interesting even seeing some baseline information going into the year and then looking at where we are getting toward the end of the year. I really like doing some disaggregation of data to understand, to make sure that we're personalizing the education process for every student.
So I think that if we add that now, I like the idea of looking at it now.
Right.
And then later on in the year, how we're progressing toward the end of
Right.
this coming year.
And we've seen some of that information from John Yellowies, maybe 2 years ago, but I don't want to drop that. I'd like to see it keep coming.
David?
Well, there's one thing I want to talk about, but it's, first thing I want to ask is, the assessments were taken at the end of the year, or prior to the end of the year. Don't we usually get the results of the assessments in the fall? So I don't
OSPI
see-
just released the aspect data
Excuse
from
me?
last year. OSPI just released the last year's
Right.
aspect data, yeah.
So my question is, I don't see anything on our fall calendar to discuss the outcomes of our assessments. and I'm
That's
just-
one of the places that we basically reserve for the DLI, Department of Learning and Innovation.
Okay.
Since we moved assessment within that department so that
Gotcha.
you can answer the very questions you're asking. That's one of the first reports that'll be coming your way.
Okay.
And by the way, just proudly,
Okay. Thank you, because that sort of piggybacks. I wanted to know, I know this is a 12-year action plan, and that we'll come up with a longer-range strategic plan next year, but as far as reporting back to the board on the progress of the goals, like, will we get a quarterly report where we're at, especially on our academic achievement, because I was looking at OSPI website the other night at some of our standards, and I wasn't 100% thrilled in some of the areas that where we're at currently. So I'd like to see updates on those. The other thing is, since you brought it up, Art, On goal 5, engage community in efforts to respond to excessive teen use of vaping. I'm hearing more and more from community members about, and I know I've mentioned this to you and to Deb recently, that I'm hearing more and more from community members about how bad the vaping is in our high schools. Whether this is true or not, I was told that during lunch, our high schoolers are taking their lunch into the bathroom stalls so they can eat their lunch in the bathroom stalls so they can vape. So I'm hearing that from the community, so if that's not true, I'd like to know it, but since John's in the room, I'm just letting you know I'm hearing that our students are going into the bathroom stalls and eating their lunch, you know, and vaping, so.
So it's good that we have it as a goal, and that we're going to
All I'm saying is that we don't have anything on the calendar that allows us to actually bring something up, and because this is coming to me almost every other day now about the vaping problem, and we're seeing it on national news now, that this lung disease that's being caused by vaping. I really want to see the school district take this up and readily take this up.
My response is very simple. Number 2 on goal 5 is a commitment to take
Right.
that on.
Okay, yeah,
And
right here.
I think you're honest, and I think we should have a school safety report, and it should include all of those things, and I think that could be added to the board calendar as well as a reporting process back to us. I think that substance abuse has been it's a problem in all of our communities, not just the Peninsula School District.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Having a student that recently graduated, it's prevalent because it's so easy and it's practically scentless. So it's hard for the teachers to be on top of that.
Yep.
And I think it just presents yet another challenge, right, for our schools. And it's also really readily available. They can get it on the internet. So I'm glad that you brought it up, and I think that would be another great thing to add to our calendar.
Glad to see that it's going to be a goal and a focus. And I know that Becky is working with an oncologist over in Tacoma and partnering with Liberty High School, and they're doing some work in Peninsula with Escape the Vape. So I think there's going to be some great things that come out of that to help it immediately.
Yeah, and I wasn't trying to put you on the spot. I'm just letting you know, more and more members of the community are coming to me and calling me and texting me and emailing me and saying they're really concerned about this problem. And so.
Well, all may be banned very soon. So
But-
they're going to run out. They can't sell it anymore.
Well, and that came up
That
at the
easy.
community council meeting last night as well. Derek Jones was
Okay.
the presenter. and
So let's stick
a big
to the
discussion.
goals here. Lori?
Are we just commenting?
Commenting, or if you see, if there's something on here that you just really feel like we need to have included as a goal for this next 9 months that we really want to focus on.
Well, I would just echo that was going to be my comment, that I think that's extremely important, is the whole, but I also really like the language here, that develop partnerships with community health and counseling and engage community in efforts to, so it's not just, the district's reaching out to experts and other people for those things. And also the harassment and bullying, I think, is, I'm excited to see that on here. Efforts to educate staff and students, and so I'm excited about that. And just a comment on the communications. I think a lot of this is already happening. I mean, just a shout out to Amy. I think we're seeing a lot of exciting things already happening. I mean, the fact that this stuff's on the website, and I think that goes a long way toward helping the community feel like they understand what they've invested in, and that what's happening. So, and it makes everything more transparent, when everyone can see easily what we're doing, so.
I have a question on, I love under goal 2, 1B, to enhance efforts to recruit a more diverse staff. And I like the fact that we're enhancing the efforts to do it, but I don't know if you look at the measured by a staff demographic report. I don't know that that should be our measurable, because I don't think we should be measured by the number of the diversity that we are able to hire. I think we are asked as a district to present that and make that as an effort to go out and recruit a more diverse staff, but I don't think we should be measured by if we have one or not. Because I have issues with that as, for hiring just for the sake of hiring. I've seen it happen a lot
Yeah.
in different industries, and I don't want to go down that road.
So I'm going to push back gently on that. I think that it's important to have intentionality when we're looking at diversity of staff. What I have found is in the things that I have read and seen is that if you don't intentionally look for qualified, and that's also sort of an assumption that people make, is that when we look at a diverse staff, that we're assuming that they're not qualified. Of course, they're going to be qualified first, right? We would not hire them unless they were qualified, and we were confident that they were going to serve our students and our community well. So knowing that as part of the norm, perhaps you may not want to have the actual demographic report, but I would like to see some intentionality of how they're creatively, how we are as a district creatively recruiting in areas and ways and places that we maybe typically don't, to try to find these people to come to
And
our
I agree, so that
district.
is part of B. So put those systems in place, and that is the report back to us. It's like,
It's
here's
part
the
of the
different
report,
systems.
but I still would
But
like
the,
to see that breakout.
We can broaden number 2 to show what it is we're developing as far as process and direction, and whether or not it's achieving any results. It's probably too early to necessarily show our results, but that doesn't stop us from saying, here's where we are, and here's what we're doing to enhance it.
Yep.
I think to your point, and just a slightly different take on it, than is simply that this is based on a conversation I had recently with an administrator who went to a great deal of effort and traveled to try and recruit a few persons and toward this end, and were not able to get those persons interested in coming to this district. And so I think that just that we shouldn't be penalized. If the report only shows the numbers, that could penalize you in a way that isn't necessarily fair.
Right.
I
That's
don't
what I'm
think
saying.
it should be a punitive
That's all I'm
thing.
saying. I mean, not, just
Yeah,
that it
I
would
think-
look.
But I think it's something that needs to be considered, and we need to look at what those barriers could be. Are
For
these
sure.
barriers that we can then remove? Is it, there's a way that makes it more palatable? What are those things that are inhibiting or prohibiting, or so people are making those choices of not coming to our district?
And I think that is incorporated in B, and I wish that would be more of the report back to us. is
I think
what
it
are
should
those
include all of it,
methods?
is what I'm saying.
I will take that on as a challenge and
Perfect.
bring back an amended number 2.
Perfect.
I would 100% agree with Deb on that, because I personally have seen the intentionality of adding diversity and equity backfire, and so keyword being qualified. So I think as long as we focus on the keyword being qualified, I think we
Well,
can
and
be
You could
intentional.
add that to the.
And I think
Yeah.
that I don't want people to think those two things are mutually exclusive, because they are not. They can be qualified, right, and we can still be intentional. Those two things can still happen in the same sphere.
I agree. I have seen,
So we're going to assume that we're going to only look at qualified, right? Let's make
yeah,
that the
that would
norm,
be a good assumption.
right? Because that's what we have always done, and we will continue to do. But to be more intentional and creative in how we recruit is all I'm asking for, and that the report reflect all of these things.
Good. That on top of building 4 schools, I think that's in here. At least Pioneer Elementary is
And we have 11.
noted. I know this is a lot of work, and,
I actually had another
Oh,
comment. Are we
sorry,
finished?
Leslie.
I'm sorry. No, I
no,
didn't know.
we're not finished. I
I'm sorry. I didn't know.
didn't, yeah, yes.
One of the things that I would also am curious about, I like the fact that I think the Healthy Youth Survey is a great baseline. I love the idea that we're also going to be doing a more in-depth survey of parents and kids. But I'm wondering what other tools we have in our tool belt to determine the needs of our students, right? Because I know that one of the things that Becky and Erin have been working on is increasing the number of the counselor-student, or making adjustments to the counselor-student ratio so that it is more supportive. But how do we know what type of counselors and support our students and staff need if we don't have some sort of data to kind of help us sort of determine what those needs are? So I'm just, you don't have to answer it now, but one of my wonderings will be what kind of data and monitoring and other information will we be pulling from our schools to make sure that we're supporting our students in the way they need the most.
Yeah, I guess I don't necessarily see that as a report back to the board. I see that as looking at that department and saying, make sure that our kids are met. We're looking at goals here, so I don't know
Right.
that would be.
Well, I think that it aligns actually, as far as, it's gonna be a supportive piece, right? The data that we're using when we're looking at whole child, when we're looking at the social emotional piece, but also when we're looking at school safety holistically, where the kids feel just physically and emotionally safe and secure, right? So I think it's important data that kind of crosses a couple of goals, so something to consider.
So I guess it's more of a report back to us, not necessarily a
It's
goal
the
to
data,
the
it's the
board.
data that's gonna be encapsulated in the report back to us, right? Because he's looking as measured by, how are we measuring?
Mhm.
And so I just think that data should be a part of it.
Okay.
Doesn't have to be
Something to
standalone,
think about.
but.
Not inappropriate. Okay, any other, Leslie, Lori?
Could I just build a little bit on, Leslie triggered something that reminded me of a regional meeting that we went to up at the Seattle area. And I went, and I can't remember who went with me, maybe it was Leslie, someone else. But listening to those districts talk about the student support models, what we would call counseling in the past, but the variety of creating models that were not the one that we all know and grew up with, but something different, and differentiating that kind of counseling and resource support. So I think it would be worthwhile to look at some other models in supporting students and the whole student and the whole child.
Other things that you're looking for in terms of discussion on the action plan?
No, I think we've set the agenda for reporting opportunities. We're trying to set, really, these are the things we're narrowly working on, recognizing they're really not narrow. Some of them are very broad and wide. The very reporting and discussion during study sessions will wander into a variety of places of what's next, what's working, what's not working, what kind of things haven't we had a chance to tackle yet. So I look forward to just starting with something like this that I think is visible, it's understandable, and we'll have these. We're definitely going to come up short on all the places that you could go, but that will help us develop that next step and the next step and the next step. So I'm not quite sure, Mr. Olson, whether I've got 12 years that you mentioned.
Yeah, you said 12 years instead of 1 year.
Oh.
That's okay.
Okay.
No.
We have plenty of time to get there,
Yeah,
ma'am.
Yeah.
So,
We have time.
with these goals in mind, or, some adjustment, whatever, and action plan, in your cabinet meetings and the work that you've just referred to earlier tonight about some of the initiatives and whatnot, this doesn't send them off for a different direction?
No.
It's in
No.
line with everything, so we're.
Correct.
Okay.
We've tried to be really careful that this didn't suddenly veer off
Okay.
and ignore the work that was underway, but at the same time, put in writing some of the things we were working towards that really had not been affirmed as necessarily a target or a goal. So I'm hoping it's a very practical, useful device, and you will see it in the reporting, you'll see it in our actions in our organization, and we'll certainly be re-examining pieces and whole parts in our study sessions and reports.
Can I ask a favor?
No,
Okay,
that was
we're
only if
done.
we needed,
Okay, fantastic.
that was in
Sorry.
relation.
No, it's okay.
Leslie?
I just was wondering, and I don't know if the rest of the board is interested, but I would certainly love a new bullet point, sort of a description of the new Department of Learning and Innovation, of what actually falls under there, because I know there's been a lot of changes and a lot of wonderful things happening, and I know they did a presentation at one point, but kind of how it's coalesced and what it looks like now. Like, I know assessment's under there. What else is under the umbrella of the DLI?
Are you talking about the action plan or just in general?
Just in general, I just
Okay,
had a
gotcha.
wondering and a
Okay.
favor. That's
Okay,
all.
perfect. Yeah, I
Yeah,
think that's good.
Yeah.
The very first meeting that they're going to be reporting is really to cover that scope and direction and both is to celebrate some of the things they're working on and to give you more definition in that.
It's a neat department.
Well, we look forward to the 26th. You're up. Excellent. Good. Okay. Anything else on that?
Nope,
Okay.
that's it.
We do not have executive session tonight. So with that, the meeting is adjourned. No, David.
Okay.
Oh, shoot.
No.
So, before you close adjourn, I sent the school board an email with the legislative conference handbook that has all the positions that that OSPI and WASDA are working on. So between now and the next school board meeting, in 2 weeks, if you could review that handbook and see if there's any issues or comments you want me and Leslie to talk about while we're at the legislative conference,
And
please.
actually, they've had it since mid-August, because I sent it out.
Well,
Right, no, but we,
yeah,
I don't
but
think
I
we've
think it's
received
good
any
to
feedback
comment
yet
on.
from them.
yeah, I haven't
Right.
received any feedback, so I sent it back out to the board. And
Right.
so if there's like 115 of them in there, so if you want to review them, if there's anything that
David-
jumps off the page that you let me know.
David, can I ask you a clarifying question, since I've never been to the full ledge assembly before? So is it better for us to put top 5, top 10? What is your recommendation? Because I know there's a whole long list.
Well, typically, when you get there, they already sort of have their top 10 already picked out.
Right.
And so unless you come there, like with your, I think Marcia agreed with me on this, unless you come in there with your team all lined up to help go to the mic and push your agenda through, we typically, if we were gonna try and add something, we would have worked on that earlier in the year as a board, which we did a couple years ago. We actually had something added to their top 10. But we usually go in the first days, just everyone talking about what all the issues are. We have state reps in there and yada, yada, yada. Second day's the voting. So if there's something that you want brought to the mic, you can certainly tell us what those are. If one of them isn't in the top 10, you know, you can go to the mic and you can tell the group, I would like to see this considered for the top 10.
Good, yeah. And I think
I don't know what the top 10 is.
I can
don't
put
know
that, I can talk to you about that.
Yeah, I think if you guys go offline and talk about that. For right
Yeah.
now, I think what David's asking is for feedback, and then he will bring back kind of a consolidated, what we think, report on the 26th.
Correct.
And then, David, I appreciate going to the legislative conference on the 27th and 28th, as well as Leslie will be there over in Spokane. Thank you for doing that. Thank you. And with that, so can you guys work on that
I
offline?
can, but I just had a really quick thing too, is there value in bringing it up in the region meeting? Because I think there's something to be said about numbers as well, so.
The region meeting will be after the ledge
Right,
conference.
but in the
so-
future, when we talk about it, when we're talking about our, whatever it is that we want to talk about as far as legislative priorities go, I think the region meetings are a really great place because it's county.
I will bring that up with WASDA. They set the agenda for that. I know that they've given us our, and so I've spoken directly with the executive director, and he has a set schedule. He's given us 30 minutes, and we've filled it
Right.
up. So I will make that recommendation to him as well. He's got a pretty good agenda for the 60 minutes for the rest of the meeting.
Okay, I'll give him an email too.
With that, at 8:03, I adjourn the meeting.
But that's not determined.